Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Hey, I made a mistake yesterday. I was getting ahead of myself. I was kind of anxious to get there. I said that we were going to start looking at Matthew chapter 24, verse 35. Well, obviously, I overlooked verse 34. Well, how could I do that, for crying out loud? This verse, Matthew 24, verse 34, has been called the center point, the pivot point, the key text of the Olivet Discourse. Even Kenneth Gentry, who takes a divided discourse view, appeals to verse 34 as proof positive that everything up to that verse in Matthew 24 was fulfilled in AD 70. In the tradition in which I was raised as a fifth generation amillennialist, Matthew 24 was seen as the absolute proof positive that even verses 29 to 31 were fulfilled in AD 70. It was recognized that Matthew 24, 29 to 31 spoke of the Lord's spiritual coming at the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. And so, verse 34, let me tell you, this verse has caused no little consternation. The dispensationalists down through the years have offered the following. Well, Jesus wasn't speaking of his generation. He was speaking of the generation that would see the signs. Well, you know, in principle, I agree with that. I really do. The problem for the dispensational world is the first century saw those signs. We have already documented for you how the gospel was preached into all of the world as a witness to the nations in the first century. We have documented for you even that Paul said the, quote, man of sin, unquote, was already alive, sitting in the temple, already being restrained. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, 5 and following. Folks, listen, you can't restrain what is not there. And Paul said the mystery of godliness is already at work. Now, had he been absolutely fully revealed yet? No, that's what Paul says. But he was there being restrained 2,000 years ago. And so, in principle, we can say, well, yes, the generation to see the signs would be the generation of Christ coming and the end of the age. That's correct. But to reemphasize, Jesus' generation was the generation that saw the signs. Then, of course, we have been told, well, the word generation here does not refer to a time period. It refers to a kind of people. In other words, an evil kind of people would be the way that it would be used. Now, I think it rather amazing that anyone would try to make that argument. And by the way, even the lexicons that are sometimes cited, when they give us Luke chapter 16, how long shall I be with this generation? That doesn't work for this kind of people. Oh no, Jesus was saying, how long will I be with you in this generation? But you see, let's try this argument, this generation, and we'll look at this deeper. I'll share some further thoughts with you as we proceed on this examination of this generation. Now remember, folks, this generation shall not pass should be viewed directly in the light of Jesus giving the signs the signs being seen in that generation, and Jesus saying, when you see these things come to pass, then know that he, the parousia, is at hand. Okay? So that generation saw the completion of the world mission. That let them know the end was near. That let them know this generation will not pass. So when we look at the term, this generation, in light of the signs, recognition of the signs being an indication that the end was near, then that means that this generation shall not pass, must be seen within the context of that generation, because that generation saw the signs. Remember, Jesus said, when you see all these things come to pass, know that it is nigh, even at the door. James, writing later in that very same identical generation, wrote, brethren, be patient until the coming of the Lord. The coming of the Lord has drawn near. The judge is standing right at the door. James is saying that what Jesus said would take place in that generation. James is saying it was there right then in his generation. And then we're told in an absolutely amazing bit of linguistic and grammatical distortion and perversion that, well, this generation means making babies, producing offspring. No, that would be genos, not genea. And it most assuredly would not be the definite, the demonstrative article, this generation. So when we look at the alternatives that are offered to us for the definition of this generation, the explanations that are given in order to try to avoid the obvious. Look, the lexicons point out that when you have the demonstrative this generation, that it is all but invariably referring to all of the people living at a given time. It's not referring to baby making. It is speaking of all of the people living at a given time. And thus, when we do, as I suggested a moment ago, when we link what Jesus said, when you see these things come to pass, know that it is near, even at the door, and it would be near, folks, in a certain given time frame. Okay? Not in some abstract, metaphysical, unknown or unknowable. When you see these things come to pass, know that it is near, even at the door. Verily I say unto you, this generation will by no means pass away until all of these things are fulfilled. Well, wait a minute. The Great Commission was fulfilled. The appearance of false teachers, false prophets, the apostasy was fulfilled. The man of sin sitting in the temple was fulfilled. When you see all these things, know that it is near, even at the door. This generation will not pass until it's all fulfilled. The attempts to negate and to avoid the power and the force and the application of this generation will by no means pass are absolutely astounding, but they are untenable, they are specious, and they are false. Do you know why people came up with these explanations, folks? It's really simple. Going all the way back to the time of Chrysostom, the explanation of this generation as the race of humanity and other definitions that I've already shared with you. Those definitions were created out of thin air because commentators believed that the coming of the Lord and the end of the age is an earth-burning, time-ending event in which Jesus, as a 5'5" Jewish man, has to come out of heaven riding on a literal cumulus cloud. Since that didn't happen, then the normal, the grammatical, the linguistic application and definition of this generation could not stand. They had to redefine the term and to make it mean something that it simply does not mean. Because, you know, let's face it, if this generation will by no means pass until all of these things are fulfilled, then the Lord has come, the end of the age has come, and futurism is dead. We'll look even closer at the term this generation on the flip side. I'll see you there.